It's 1942, and Chinese sailor Poon Lim is drifting in the Atlantic, ripping apart a flashlight to build a fishing hook. He survived 133 days doing exactly this. Staring down starvation and exposure on a raft establishes a baseline for what the human body can endure. But weathering the sheer physical elements is often just the beginning of the nightmare. Out on the open water, the ocean is rarely the only thing trying to kill you. This diagram shows the three distinct, overlapping threats a sailor faces. You have the unforgiving environment, the lethal hostility of an armed enemy, and the internal chaos of your own crew. When those three vectors crash together, logic and standard protocol go out the window. Surviving that lethal intersection requires a stubborn, almost unhinged refusal to accept death. To see how that plays out, look at John Paul Jones. Long before he fought the British in 1779, he proved his survival instincts when an outbreak of yellow fever wiped out his ship's commanders, forcing him to navigate a stranded vessel back to Scotland at just 21 years old. By the time the American Revolution kicks off, he's volunteering to sail the newly formed Continental Navy straight into European waters. The Americans are outgunned and outfunded, making direct engagements against the world-class British Navy practically suicidal. This massive resource gap leads to a catastrophic mechanical failure. Jones attacks a British merchant convoy, but he's armed with discount cannons bought from a scrapyard. On their very first volley, those weapons explode inside his own ship, the Bonhomme Richard, blowing holes below the waterline while the British rain down heavy fire. With his ship actively sinking into freezing waters, Jones gives a shocking order: ram the British vessel head-on. The two wooden hulls smash together, locking the rigging in a tangled mess. Looking down at the smoking wreckage of the American ship, the British captain demands a surrender. Surrounded by ocean water and dead gunners, Jones screams back, "I have not yet begun to fight." Pure chaos ensues. Brutal hand-to-hand combat immediately erupts on the upper decks, while both massive wooden ships burn out of control. The stalemate finally breaks when an American sailor crawls out onto a yardarm and drops a single grenade straight down an open hatch on the British ship, perfectly detonating their main gunpowder reserve. The British commander finally yields his sword. Jones watches his own vessel sink to the ocean floor the very next morning, but he and his men survive simply because they commandeered the heavily damaged enemy ship and sailed it away. Tactical audacity literally kept them afloat. But what happens when the ocean spits you out? Sometimes a shipwreck doesn't mean drowning. It means being thrown directly onto a hostile coast, right into the waiting hands of an enemy. In the 1650s, a man named Francois escaped brutal indentured servitude on a Caribbean plantation by joining up with a group of buccaneers. He traded a life of hard labor for a new career hijacking Spanish galleons. 2 years into this venture, his crew wrecks their ship on the Yucatan Peninsula. Stranded on the beach with zero supplies, they attempt to march inland, but walk straight into a heavily armed Spanish ambush. The buccaneers are vastly outgunned, and the beach turns into a total slaughter. Watching his friends die around him, Francois makes a split-second, visceral decision. He smears himself from head to toe in the blood of his crewmates and physically buries his body underneath their mangled corpses, lying perfectly still as the soldiers inspect the carnage. The Spanish buy the gruesome disguise and march away. Crawling out from under the bodies, Francois finds a few escaped slaves, locates a tiny wooden rowboat, and navigates back across the treacherous Caribbean Sea to the pirate sanctuary of Tortuga. Francois survived the trek, but the trauma of the massacre shifted his trajectory. He spent his final years as a ruthless predator, beheading dozens of Spanish soldiers and using horrific torture to exact revenge on the nation that nearly buried him. The elements and the enemy are external threats. But our final maritime peril comes from within, surviving the sheer, staggering incompetence of your own side. We jump to 1904, amidst the raging Russo-Japanese War. Tsar Nicholas orders Admiral Rozhestvensky to sail the Russian Baltic Fleet 18,000 miles to Asia. Rozhestvensky is a capable commander, but his crew consists almost entirely of conscripted peasants who have never seen the ocean, let alone operated a warship. This map tracks an agonizing 8-month voyage of panic. The Kamchatka falsely reports torpedoes, sparking hysteria. During practice, gunners fire live rounds into their own tow vessel. Somehow, despite his men actively firing on themselves, Rozhestvensky drags the fleet to the Tsushima Strait near Japan. But waiting for them is the highly disciplined Imperial Japanese Navy. Admiral Togo executes a devastating tactical maneuver called crossing the T, steaming his ships directly across the Russian line to block their escape while unleashing every cannon he has. The result is a total massacre. By sunset, 4 Russian battleships are at the bottom of the ocean. Rozhestvensky's flagship is blasted to pieces, and Japanese torpedo boats are hunting down the scattered survivors in the dark. Out of the massive fleet, only 3 ships make it to safety. Yet, Japanese forces find Rozhestvensky floating alive in the wreckage. He survived the catastrophic destruction of his ship and an 18,000-mile voyage with men who couldn't aim a cannon, showing that survival sometimes just means enduring relentless, chaotic incompetence until the very end. The ocean is the ultimate pressure cooker. Isolated on the water, crises constantly compound. A mechanical failure leaves you vulnerable to cannon fire, and a shipwreck delivers you straight into an ambush. When the sea strips away your supplies, your physical advantages, and your backup, standard logic completely falls apart. You can't just follow protocol when you're trapped beneath the corpses of your crewmates or commanding an actively sinking ship. Ultimately, surviving the deepest waters comes down to a pure, uncompromising defiance in the face of inevitable death. Which of these extreme historical ocean survivors do you find the most unbelievable? Let us know down in the comments. And be sure to hit that like button